Hi ladies, welcome to Pathways to Fertility, a YouTube station dedicated to the women, especially the women who are on the hardcore journey to conceive. You are the women who are figuring out ways to improve your egg quality, your physical being, your mental being, so that you can give everything you can to try to conceive the baby of your dreams. I am Samantha Jacobs. I'm a licensed acupuncturist in Connecticut and New York. And since I graduated in 2003, I have dedicated my practice to helping women conceive their babies. And I'm here to give you as much information as possible. Today we're going to be talking about the next stage in follicular development. And just before we delve in, quick recap on the primary follicles where we left off in our last video. And a primary follicle is simply a follicle that has been awoken and has been recruited for the potential chance to ovulate 300 days down the line. And a primary follicle has three basic structures contained within itself, and that is granulosa cells, theca cells, egg, and they are all responsive and able to grow under the influence of luteinizing hormone and FSH. We have gone approximately 200 days jumping ahead, and we are moving into the next stage of follicular development, a secondary follicle. Now, at this point in follicular growth, there's not much difference between a primary follicle and a secondary follicle, except there are more cells in a secondary follicle, so it's growing in size. And as we get more cells that are responsive to luteinizing hormone and FSH, we get more estrogen. So the follicle is growing in size and it's secreting more estrogen out into the bloodstream. And then we're seeing a change within the follicle itself. We're starting to see pockets of follicular fluid develop inside the cell. These three basic components indicate to us the difference between a primary follicle and a secondary follicle. So now we are approximately about 60 days before an egg has been picked for ovulation. And at this point, the secondary follicle is moving into the tertiary follicle stage. Now, a tertiary follicle is more commonly called a Graafian follicle. And my understanding is that they both mean the same thing. It just indicates a certain stage of follicular development. And it appears that a Graafian follicle is what the term is that's commonly used in the literature. So I'm going to stick with the term Graafian follicle, but know that tertiary follicle is the same thing. Now, we are definitely moving closer to ovulation. We're about 60 days away from having the egg picked and ovulated. And what moves us away from the secondary to this tertiary follicle? There are key developmental signs that tell us that it's become a Graafian follicle. First of all, the egg has now fully been taken care of by the follicle. It's been nurtured, it's gone through certain particular stages so that it can become available for fertilization. We now have all those pockets of fluid that were appearing in the secondary follicle. Well, all those pockets have now come together and they are forming a structure called the atrium. And I just want to put this in here because I think it's really interesting. Many of my clients don't know this, right? When you are doing IVF, you might have noticed your doctor will say, oh, let's do an antrical follicle count. Well, the antrical follicle is actually referring to the atrium. So when they're doing a count during the baseline scan, they are looking for the follicles that have an atrium. They're looking for Graafian follicles. So we now have the atrium inside the follicle. And third of all, we have full maturation of the zona pellucida. And interestingly enough, there's a third component going in and around the zona pellucida is a structure called the corona radia. And that corona radia works with the zona pellucida for encouraging fertilization after ovulation with a very willing and happy sperm. So these key components are indicating to us that this is a Graafian follicle and it is ready for ovulation. Approximately 1 week before you get your period, there is a special sort of feedback loop between the brain and the ovary, and one Graafian follicle gets picked for ovulation. And all the other follicles get picked for elimination. So we can see how that recruitment process that I spoke about in the very first video, we can see how this is playing out right up all the way to the end. Right, the follicle's growing, estrogen levels are increasing. Those estrogen levels are being received by the brain, and the pituitary, in response to those increasing levels of estrogen, secrete a surge of luteinizing hormone. And that surge of luteinizing hormone encourages the dominant follicle to become more permeable. It allows for more fluid to come into the follicle, and the permeability is starting to increase its size, and certain enzymes are getting triggered by all this extra luteinizing hormone, and those enzymes start breaking down the cells around the egg. And this is the point of ovulation. And this is the part I think it's like so magical and amazing, right? The egg pops out of the follicle. All this follicular fluid comes out of the follicle. And there is certain signaling systems going on during ovulation that encourage the fallopian tube to change the way its fingers move. They become more stiff and they become like a rake. And the follicular fluid has an ability to call to the fallopian tube, and the fallopian tube, the fingers start creating movement in the follicular fluid. And that allows the egg to flow in the follicular fluid up into the fallopian tube. I mean, like, how amazing is that, ladies? Like, we are so cool. And all that follicular fluid is encouraging a supportive environment, not only for the egg, but also for the sperm. And then the egg is being held, the fingers hold the egg inside of itself up inside the ends of its fingers, waiting for potential ovulation. Now, there's another action going on in this process, and that is the release of something inside the follicle called the corpus luteum. And what happens during the surge is that there are special cells that get converted into cholesterol and fat. And those cells, cholesterol and fat, are yellow. And this cluster of yellow cells is called the corpus luteum, and corpus luteum refers to being yellow. And you can think of this corpus luteum as being a balloon with a pump. And inside the balloon is progesterone. And it just sort of hangs out and does its own thing. It's like, you know, the follicle has come to the end of its usefulness, and now this corpus luteum is just hanging out, and it's pumping out progesterone. And it contains enough progesterone to be secreted for 14 days. Progesterone encourages the lining to hold for potential fertilization. The corpus luteum encourages a woman's body to want to be and stay pregnant. We can now understand, we can see that it takes approximately 14 days for an egg to ovulate. And we can now see that the corpus luteum has enough progesterone to secrete to last 14 days. We can now start to see why we have a 28-day cycle. Now, I mean, some women are going to be longer and shorter, and within a certain range, that's all normal. And this just shows us the balance that's going on between two very active phases in our cycles and how they come together and cooperate with each other and make this miracle happen. It's amazing to think what an egg can do and how much its intention is to try to conceive, how beautifully intricate and complicated and yet so simple. So I'm hoping that this kind of gives you a brief understanding of what it's like to see an egg grow over time. And in my next video, we're going to start delving into the topic of what can we do to make our eggs better? What can we do to improve our fertility? And boy, is this going to be a long, complicated topic. Thanks for listening. If you like what you see, hit like, subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. I will not lie. At this point in my life, at 55, it is no easy task creating these videos and the content. If you have any ideas for future videos, any comments, please leave them. I love interacting with my audience, and I look forward to connecting with you on our next video. Thank you.